welcome to Tall Tales
and short stories.
You talked over me right as
I thought.
Welcome to Tall Tales
and short stories.
There we go.
How's that better? Okay, we good.
We good.
With Tim and Tony.
I'm Tony,
And I'm Tim.
and we are going to go and drink vodka and fight bears now.
There lived a certain man in Russia long ago. He was big and strong, and his eyes a flaming glow. Most people look at him with terror and with fear. But
Okay, that's enough copyright infringement.
We were fine. We were fine.
Okay, that's enough of your terrible singing voice.
My heart. Stabbed in my heart.
If you don't know already, we are going to be taking this episode and talking about Grigory Yevpovich Rasputin.
Gesundheit.
See.
No, it'd be da. Because we're going to Russia. Dummkopf. Oh, wait, that's German. Fuck!
We'll edit that out.
No, I'm keeping this in. I'm keeping that in. That's funny.
Rasputin, the great holy man, slash sorcerer, slash madman, slash monk, slash... He had everything on his resume.
Oh, yeah.
Absolute powerhouse, politically, culturally, in Russia, in his era.
One could even argue power hungry.
Definitely power hungry. There's no arguing there.
Big time.
In his era of the late 1800s up until, I believe, the 1916, 17-ish.
Yep, right when the Russian Revolution happened.
Still into today. Like, his legacy still lives on with legends of how he died, how he came to power, his cults, his religion, everything.
Oh, yeah. He was also your height, dude.
Was he really?
He's 6'4".
All right.
Well, he was 6'4", and now he's 6 feet under.
6'4" under. So yeah, we're gonna talk about some of the history and the life of Mr. Rasputin, and then we'll talk about his lovely followers that Tim has promised me is absolutely horrifying. So,
well, not really followers, more like a group that he may have had association with. I'm gonna save all that for when we get to it.
So, born January 22nd or January 10th in old style. I guess that's before some sort of calendar change. You know, before that went to committee.
All right, so we're uncertain which. Oh, actually, hang on a second. Old style and new style dates would be the case there, because you got the Julian calendar, which is what they do, and then the Gregorian calendar, which is what we follow.
Of course, Gregorian.
Gregory.
Illuminati.
Ah, those damn lizard folks again. I see them out there.
Rasputin was a lizard. Can confirm now. Born in January of 1869, Grigory Yevpovich Rasputin was born in, oh god, more Russian names, Polskoy near Tyumen, Siberia. And I looked it up on Google Maps. Nowadays, it's a 28-hour car drive to Moscow.
Oh, wow. So he's out in the Russian boonies.
He's out near me. He's out near my hometown, basically.
Let's see, where's that? Oh, okay, I had to look up where that was at. Wow.
Yeah.
That's not, like, out there, but that's
That's
still,
out there enough.
That's out there enough, yeah. The Tyumen Oblast
Was basically the right-hand man to Alexei Nikolaevich, the hemophiliac heir to the Russian throne. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the last Russian princess Anastasia was heir to Nikolai, or Alexei Nikolaevich. Everyone's Nicholas or Alexei in Russia.
No, Anastasia was daughter to Nicholas II.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah, so Alexei would be his... So Alexei would be his... Yeah.
Okay. They're all related.
That actually is true. The Romanov family was in power for centuries.
Yes. But Rasputin was the man behind the curtains for a lot of that time. He died at 47.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it would have to be the fact that he had such a he had such an air about him that he upset a lot of people.
He had that cult leaderish air of arrogance and calm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even looking from the pictures taken of him, nah, I'm good. I'm not interested.
You can definitely see like his eyes. Like his eyes are very piercing.
Dead like a doll's eyes.
And I've actually seen like colored photos. He had blue eyes.
Really?
Yeah, he had piercing blue eyes, that gaunt face, and then obviously one of the obvious things that everybody associates with Rasputin, big old beard. A big
old Russian beard.
Big old black beard.
So, he was the right-hand man to the emperor of the Russian Empire. This massively influential character in court, in the empire itself, almost around the world, I dare say, being in that time frame of the turn of the century.
Mm-hmm.
Man couldn't read a word out of a book. Completely illiterate.
Ain't that amazing, huh?
That caught me off guard. I was reading through this. I'm like, wait, what? No. What? No. Earned the surname Rasputin, which translates from Russian to the debauched one.
Alrighty then.
Yeah. If you had, I mean, everyone sort of knows the name Rasputin, knows, oh, he died this way or that way. And the Kingsman prequel was a pretty, I would say, kind of accurate depiction of him.
I still have not seen it.
It's pretty good.
I need to. It's on my list. I know he's in it, and I've been told it's really good.
Yeah. Was sexually active.
As I have heard the stories.
I believe there's a story that his Rasputin Jr. was like embalmed somewhere in a jar, and it was like a magnificent specimen in and of itself.
Yeah.
From what stories I've heard. Yeah, man was an interesting figure. Went into had a religious conversion at 18.
Mm-hmm.
At the monastery at Verkhauter, sounds German, where he was introduced to the Caleste, the flagellants.
That's the group.
That's the group.
That's the group.
That's the group.
And I have a lot about them.
Oh God! Should we go into them and then diverge back into the rest of his life? Or?
Yeah, because they happen early. It is believed this happened early on in his life, like when he left the village to pursue priesthood.
Well, how'd he get there? He couldn't read the signs.
Probably had people show him around, and then but I'll get to it.
Well, if you'd like to take the member on this one,
I can get a good grip.
All right. Just don't suck at this.
Nah. Anyway. So yeah, allegedly it is thought that Rasputin had ties to a group known as the Klisti, or the Klists, depending which one I do. The same group, by the way. They were an underground spiritual Christian group that split from the Orthodox Church back in 1645, and they lasted until the 1970s. Over 300 years.
Well, to touch on how long they lasted, Rasputin perverted, how do you pronounce it? Kalisti?
The Klisti?
Beliefs into a doctrine that one was nearest God when feeling holy passionlessness, and that the best way to reach such a state was through the sexual exhaustion that came after prolonged debauch. That's how they lasted so long. They just
I've got more. I've got more for that, actually.
Oh God.
Yeah. Because the thing is, like Rasputin, this group actually does have mystery behind it. Because it actually has its own folklore due to different accounts of the foundation of the group as well as its name. Because it's either a corrupted version of what the group called themselves, which was Christi, or Christs.
Okay.
So Klistis.
Yeah.
Or maybe because the Russian word for whip is also klist, which is in reference to their self-flagellation, where they would whip their backs and bodies.
I mean, if you can hire someone to do that for you.
Have you ever seen the Da Vinci Code?
No.
There's the main bad guy, I think his name is Silas. He is a monk played by Paul Bettany. He's an albino, and every time he kills somebody, he whips himself in his back.
Mm.
And the makeup they did was really good. Like, you could see, like, the marks and everything. Like, we're talking, like, he made himself bleed. Oof. I don't think Paul Bettany actually bled, but, like, that's what
the cosmetics and the prosthetics.
Yeah, it's penance. Your penance. It's penance for doing such a thing.
Yeah.
But allegedly in 1645, the Kalisti were founded by a runaway soldier and peasant named Danila Filipovich. Yep. Supposedly, he had a vision where the Godhead appeared on a fiery chariot with the seraphim following him, and he was told that he was a Christ, a chosen one, and he was to lead a group of people towards God. You know, only he saw God, and he was told this. With this revelation with the revelation and the psychological breakdown, he delivered a lot of commandments. And consider, this is again the 1640s. Yeah. So he was also a peasant. So what are peasants? They are not literate. So none of it. He did nothing. But he delivered multiple commandments from this divine revelation, including abstaining from alcohol, sex, and swearing. So we'd be out of the running for that place.
Yeah. Oh. Mm-hmm.
We would be out of there on day one. It's like, all right, everybody, now start singing. Shit, get out.
Fuck. Well,
you out too. But anyway, this removal of desires would have made them ascetics. Asceticism, which is denying your body for the sake of the soul. So they would fast for long periods of time. Oof. They would drink water on the occasion just because of it, but like they would otherwise not eat very much. They would barely sleep. Quite truly, it was a cult.
Yeah,
it was a cult. I mean,
by every means of the word.
Especially because Filipovich, he decreed that only his teachings were the way, and that any successors after him, be it either his own children or people he appointed, they would be seen as living gods. They too would become Christs, leaders, chosen ones.
Jeez. I mean, that's a good way to ensure yourself.
In fact, he separated so much from the Russian Orthodox Church, he actually called for the renouncement of clergy, holy texts, and the veneration of saints, except for the Holy Mother Mary, because women who were mothers of potential Christs could be seen as mothers of God. They had multiple Christs and multiple mothers of gods.
So we have the woman's vote, hands down.
Pretty much. And with a lot of the rituals and everything they did was kept secret and underground, usually being held in members' houses at night, for one thing. The rituals would be ecstatic, almost like, kind of makes me think of like some of those Southern Revival churches where they're just in the tents going crazy, feeling the Holy Spirit take over. These rituals would usually happen around, various feasting days, so that way they could eat. Wherein the Kalistis, they would strip to nothing but an undershirt. Now think it over, though. It's not like our t-shirts nowadays.
Yeah.
It was like a tunic that went down past your knees.
Yeah, so it was basically you're wearing a burlap sack.
Yeah, like a burlap sack, an old nightgown, something like that.
Yeah.
And they would dance and chant around madly until they claimed they could feel the Holy Spirit take over and just feel the power, feel this exhilaration take over. Once the ritual was complete, they would actually have a nice little meal of bread, nuts, pastries, and then a cereal beer called kvass. Well, again, cereal is like oats and everything, so it was an oat-based beer.
Captain Budweiser.
But the thing is, much like Rasputin, due to the underground nature of the Kalistis, rumors of wild orgies and other perversions came from outside sources.
Which is very contradictory to the no sex cursing or anything.
Exactly. So it's because they were underground and people didn't know what they were doing. Yeah. So it was just, they got persecuted for hundreds of years because of this. In fact, there were people who even made rumors and accusations that there was ritualistic infanticide. They would sacrifice babies for God and that sort of thing.
That escalated quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
And like I said, they would be persecuted for these rumors and accusations.
Yeah. Witch hunt.
And yet somehow they would stick around for centuries, because it took them 300 years. It was not until the 1970s that they kind of just stopped. Like, because they were like small groups.
Or so you think.
Because they were like small groups outside of that where nobody, they used to have like over, I think, 100,000 people. They had a fairly sizable group.
Jeez, yeah.
But then as the centuries went on...
everything sort of declined.
And then they kind of just vanished, especially after the wall fell.
Yeah.
Or just before the wall fell. Yeah. But how does Rasputin tie into all this? Like a lot of other stuff that we're going to get into with his life, it was mostly hearsay and rumors.
Uh-huh.
Like legitimately, and I mentioned how he was... I mean, the way he looks is a pretty spooky-looking dude.
Yeah, he's not... He's a Scooby-Doo villain.
Big time.
Is what he looks like.
He's a Scooby-Doo villain, and it's the fact that he was probably definitely different than what a lot of Russians back then were used to.
Yeah.
So when you're different, what's going to happen? They're going to point fingers and then start saying crazy stuff. And when they're
going to start saying stuff like, hey, can you reach that up there for me? I'm short.
Hey.
Okay.
And then in the 1900s, and I got 3 different dates, like 1903, 1907, and 1910. Yeah. So we'll just say 1903 and 1907, Rasputin was actually investigated and accused of spreading Klisti doctrine. But nothing ever came of it because there was no evidence.
Yeah.
It was all hearsay. In fact, it was all just superstitious mudslinging. That was it.
It was oh god, the 1960s communism scare.
The Red Scare.
The Red Scare. It was a lot like that. Very similar, just, you don't look like us, but you're a witch.
But it was one dude.
Yeah.
It was just one dude. And the thing about it is, his daughter, Maria Rasputin, she actually co-wrote a book that alleges that he was a part of the group at one point, but grew disillusioned from the Klisti. But at the same token, there's still a whole lot of probably didn't.
Yeah, there's still a lot of underlying maybes and
maybe not.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like I said, he turned 18, went to this monastery, got introduced to this group. A year later, at 19, he gets married to a woman, and they end up having 4 children. Like, he led a ordinary-ish life. I mean, had a wife, had kids, had a job, I guess, advisor to the king or to the czar. Had a pretty cozy setup, but then he was also associated, like we said, with this weird kind of cult, not really a cult, underground movement of people. And he ended up cranking it to 11 on some of the aspects of them, which I imagine is probably why they became disillusioned with him and vice versa. He took it to an extreme with some of the aspects. But I mean, with the sexual rumors of him and his little guy.
No, that wasn't a little guy.
No, that wasn't a little guy.
No, if you're saying that's a little guy, that is demeaning.
He was he had a whole U under his tunic.
Wait, I'm compared to Rasputin. I don't know how to feel about that actually.
Too late, you laughed.
Damn it!
Obviously, marriage. He wasn't a one-woman man.
Oh yeah, no, I've heard enough stories where he was an absolute womanizer.
Wandered. I don't know how you wander back in the 1900s and late 1800s. Wandered to Mount Athos, which is, I believe, in Greece, maybe? But wandered into Greece, into Jerusalem, just surviving off donations from people. Like, hey, come stay at our house for the evening. Traveling to Jerusalem from Russia like that. You can't do that nowadays.
Well, I mean, if you walked.
You can, but there's probably some legal issues there.
Well, yeah, you got to get your papers,
but
traveling.
The whole time he was claiming himself as a holy man, I assume probably regarding with the sect when they weren't disillusioned with each other.
I mean, I could see that also as a thing, because back then, again, this is the 1900s, the churches, be it Russian Orthodox, Catholic, they had major pull and hearsay, and not hearsay, but just say over everything. So you could just say, I am a priest, I am on a long journey, a pilgrimage, and I need to have a rest. People go, oh, he's a member of the cloth, he's fine, he can come on in.
And then he would entertain the wives and daughters. I imagine.
Oh, easily. Like, oh yeah. Russians didn't have to worry about...
Oh, shit.
Well, we're out of the Khaleesi again.
That Mount Athos I mentioned.
Yeah.
Want to know what other significance it has?
Shoot.
Mountain was discussed by Homer in the Iliad.
No kidding.
And, you remember that movie 300?
Yes.
That was the mountain that little bottleneck was at, that the Spartans defended.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anyway, yeah, I just
nice little sidetrack right there.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
That was.
Oh, damn it, I just lost my place.
But let's see, I know he's on a pilgrimage from Russia to Athos to Jerusalem. And it's like he probably did have like a horse or something to get him.
And Russia, he probably had a bear.
It Russian bear, it know how to go.
It gets 15 horsepower. Doesn't make sense.
If you feed it 15 horse, it get 15 horsepower.
Da. So, yeah, I mean, he was just a wandering holy man for this sect of weird, they have sex, but they also don't have sex group. Yeah, I mean, not that I care, but he was a leader. I mean, he was a cult leader.
Oh.
And he was just recruiting. He was doing his recruiting system.
I could easily see that.
But yeah, no, I keep interrupting your discussion about the Khaleesi's.
Nah, that's all I had.
Okay.
Yeah, because because their stuff like Rasputin, it's all rumors and circulation.
Yeah,
that's it. It's all he said, she said, the Tsar said. Well, not the Tsar. Nicholas II was big friends with. Was big friends with Rasputin.
That friendship started in 1903 when his wanderings took him to St. Petersburg. He was welcomed by Theopan, inspector of the Religious Academy of St. Petersburg, and Hermogen, bishop of Saratov. The court circles, so the higher-ups, like every other conspiracy theory, at that time were entertaining themselves by delving into mysticism and the occult. And here comes this 6'4", blue-eyed bear beard man.
Bear of a man, essentially.
That came just from a cult. Introduced himself and said he had extraordinary healing talents.
Mm-hmm.
Because, of course, you would.
Because, he comes in and says, yeah, I have the power to heal, and claims that the Holy Spirit works through him.
Exactly. So he spent a couple years sort of schmoozing up to the court. You have a look of wonderment in your eyes.
I just realized something. Rasputin is the Russian version of one of those Southern faith healers who is like, come forth, brothers and sisters, and lays hands upon them. That is what he is, and it just finally dawned on me.
So he's Russia's Joel Osteen?
Nah, he's a prosperity preacher. They're a different story.
Anyway, I'm going to keep that opinion to myself.
Yes.
So, a couple of years, he's schmoozing himself into the inner circles of the Russian court and the Russian royalty. Finally, 2 years later, in 1905, he's introduced to the royal family. And then, so he starts becoming buddy-buddy with them.
Yes.
The healing thing with the hemophiliac Alexei.
Yes.
Yeah. Schmoozing up, making himself an asset to them. Pretty damn smart for not being able to read. In 1908, he was summoned to the palace during one of the Tsar's son's hemophiliac bleeding episodes. Which I don't know how you have an episode of that. That just sounds...
Well, it may have been like a nick or something.
Yeah, and it just... Okay.
Just kept on going.
Rasputin allegedly succeeded in easing the boy's suffering through his hypnotic powers. Upon leaving the palace, I'm just imagining in dramatic fashion, whirled around with his coat or his cloth, warned the parents that the destiny of both the child and the dynasty were irrevocably linked to Rasputin himself, setting in motion his allegiance or his closeness to the family for over a decade. And obviously, if you're that close with someone in that kind of power, you kind of worm your way into the state of affairs and how daily stuff happens. Of course.
Yeah, and even potentially was friends with the Queen.
That was another thing I was going to touch on. While he was in the presence of the family and the inner courts, fell into the humble and holy peasant, I came from nothing, but I have magical powers sort of thing.
Yeah, humble beginnings and all that.
The humble beginnings. But as soon as he stepped outside the court, into the local, what do Russians call a bar?
Tavern, pub.
Whorehouse.
Brothel.
Yeah. Once he stepped outside of the palace and out of the circles of the higher-ups, that old Khaleesi energy came back.
Allegedly.
Preaching that physical... This man is brilliant in the worst ways.
All right, you have my attention.
Preaching that physical contact with his own person had a purifying and healing effect.
Is that what they're calling it now?
I believe Eminem has some lyrics like that.
That's what Rasputin's calling it. If you touch my person, you'll be healed.
That's what they call it. Acquired mistresses, obviously. Attempted to seduce many other women. When accounts of Rasputin's behavior reached the ears of Nicholas, the Tsar refused to believe anything was happening other than he was a holy man and he was helping.
Oh, my buddy is going around at whorehouses and causing a stir? No way, I can't believe it. I absolutely refuse to believe it. Nicholas, this is what we call toxic friendship. You have to smack him across the head and go, bad Rasputin, no. Now sit in the corner and think about what you did.
Well, funny you should say go sit in the corner.
Oh.
Rasputin's accusers found themselves oddly enough transferred to remote regions of the empire or entirely removed from their positions of influence.
All right, so they were removed to the corners of Russia.
To the gulags, I imagine.
What would become the gulags? Because gulags weren't
Proto-gulags.
Proto-gulags.
By 1911, so probably 3-4 years into his association.
Quite possibly the best decade that he ever had.
Yeah. His general scandalousness became general knowledge, general whereabouts.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister Stolypin sent the Tsar a report on Rasputin's misdeeds, and as a result, the Tsar finally snapped out of his toxic friendship and expelled Rasputin. But the Queen, there we go, had him returned within a matter of months. And Nicholas, realizing, don't want to piss the wife, happy wife, happy castle, palace, and the worries that Rasputin would be the only one able to save his son from the hemophiliac episodes, chose the lesser of two evils and kept the whoring monk all around.
And that definitely sat so well with the Russian nobles.
Of course. And now we get to 1915, the pinnacle of Rasputin's power.
All right. This is where we're going to get the good stuff.
During World War I, Nicholas II, I believe that would be the hemophiliac son from Prior.
Alexei?
No, Nicholas II.
No, that's the Tsar.
Okay, that's okay.
There's a lot of names. We'll work through it.
No, we have a lot of people. We just have like 3 names.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, Nicholas, Alexei, Rasputin. That's a lot of names.
5, right?
Yeah, whatever. But anyway.
Nicholas II took personal command of his forces in September of that year and went with his troops to the front, leaving Queen Alexandra in charge of Russia's internal affairs. And Rasputin's there.
Yep, so that is where all the rumors started.
Where Rasputin served as her personal advisor.
Personal in more ways than one.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Sex. Rasputin's influence ranged all over from the appointment of church officials, which that's way too much power, to the selection of cabinet ministers, usually incompetent idiots. Much like today.
Oh, God. So he legitimately was just filling the cabinet with his own people who would not turn against him.
Who would stroke his own person.
Yep.
And he intervened in military matters at Russia's expense.
Oh, God. Wow.
So, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of the queen.
Do you really want to?
Not really, no, but...
Because it's like 6'4" you and dressed in drag as the queen of Russia. And then in comes Rasputin.
You don't know what I do on Saturday night. Shut up.
You know what? I'm not even going to argue. I always suspected when we were roommates, but you know what?
Hey, that clip-clop wasn't high heels.
Okay there, Catherine the Great.
Anyway, that...
Another Russia joke.
We'll definitely edit that one out, Tim.
Yes, I could not resist. Anyway.
The military matters that you... Why would you give an illiterate monk that said he was a holy man power over the military? What do you think? I don't know what you would expect.
An army for God?
An army for God, or just... They're over there. Just go over there. What strategy? Let's not do that. What is the art of war? I don't understand this.
Yeah, Nicholas was not a good military figure.
No, he was not, and Rasputin was worse, apparently.
Oh, lordy.
But in his defense, he was an extremely strong opponent for anyone that opposed the autocracy, or obviously himself. So he sort of reached his pinnacle in 1915 with commanding armies he shouldn't be commanding, appointing officials he shouldn't be appointing, intercoursing queens. High life.
At this point, he was having the high life.
And then in 1916, the assassination attempt started.
Shocker!
Right.
Oh, shocker! Holy man who is power hungry is now being targeted by some very pissed off people.
Give you a guess. Who do you think some of those people might have been?
I'm going to assume nobles, because a lot of them got kicked out of their stations under Rasputin's influence.
Prince Felix Yusupov, husband of the Tsar's niece. Vladimir Pushkevich, a member of the Duma, which is basically a royal council, if I remember correctly from history. And Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, the Tsar's cousin.
When your own family is willing to... When your own family is saying, all right, enough, we gotta kill this guy, that's saying something.
So, those three, and I assume a few others, because you had to have henchmen and underlings.
Oh, easily.
Formed a conspiracy to eliminate Rasputin and save the monarchy from further embarrassment.
I can already imagine that a lot of women were like, please don't do that, we love him! And it's
I have his baby!
That wouldn't surprise me, because I think he had his daughter, obviously Maria, and then I think he had two others that for sure were his. So he had 3 kids in total.
4.
He had 4
kids, legitimate from his wife.
Uh-huh.
And then everything else
is... And then he may have had a bunch of bastard children.
He might have a little bit of a Genghis Khan complex.
Not nearly as much as Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, though, we'll not get
That's
into that.
That's a whole other story.
That's a big-time other story. I don't think he was on the level of Genghis Khan, but...
So, on the nights of December 29th or 30th, haven't been able to really narrow it down to an exact one.
Because it's usually like around midnight or whenever when this stuff happens, so it's right there at that cusp.
Rasputin was invited to visit Yusupov, husband of the Tsar's niece, to Yusupov's house. And this is where it sort of goes into the tall tales and story part of it.
And this is definitely sort of a... And I do know a little bit about this. This is some very, slapstick-esque.
It's very Three Stooges, Who's on First.
Yeah, very.
Sketch comedy. Like, SNL could have a good bit on this.
Big time.
But here's where it begins. According to legend, once there, he was given poisoned wine and tea cakes.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't kill him. Freaking the hell out, obviously. Yusupov shot him multiple times. Rasputin finally collapsed, then got back up and ran out of the house.
Yes.
Bleeding from all the wherevers.
Mm-hmm.
Got into the courtyard, and then was tackled, beaten with sticks, iron bars, whatever people could grab.
Yeah.
And then he was drowned.
Yeah.
Actually, before he was drowned, and I know this one because I've read it so many freaking times, his person was cut off.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was castrated.
Not even no anesthetic.
Nah, no whole bait.
Well, I mean, he had poison wine, so maybe
whole bait and tackle.
Yeah, and then he was drowned. So, beaten, shot, mangled, eunuched, drowned, still didn't die. And I think I've heard legend that he was also dragged behind a carriage, or at least his dead body was.
Yeah.
So, again, like you said, just slapstick after slapstick of things just happening. But where it does come back into reality, the conspirators then bound and threw him through a hole in the ice into the Neva River, where he finally died by drowning. But the subsequent autopsy largely refuted this account, and saying he was shot to death.
Yeah, with a bullet to the head.
Yeah.
Was the main thing. It was 3 shots. I did some looking.
Yeah.
It was 3 shots. The 2 in the chest definitely could have easily missed. Like, if you missed the right spot.
You can hit someone in the shoulder and not kill them. But I've also heard that the shot to the head didn't kill him. And that's when he actually...
Yeah.
He was out in the courtyard, got shot, then got beaten, got back up, and then got drowned.
And then was thrown in the water, drowned, even allegedly there was, like, ice under his nails trying to get out of the water. Mm-hmm. But, again, that is all... Again, the skeptic in me is coming out in this one. And it is definitely, like, this was all hearsay and stuff that happened after, because he was dead in 1916, like, near the end of 1916, beginning of 1917.
Yeah.
And when you have a legend around your name, as much as he did, from what I can tell, just thought of it, he became a boogeyman.
Yeah.
He became a boogeyman to Russia, because shortly thereafter, the monarchy fell.
Yeah.
The monarchy fell, the Russian Revolution took over.
Yeah, and it was actually, because of his murder, Queen Alexandria basically doubled down on her resolve to keep the principle of autocracy around, being Tsar's queen.
Monarchy.
Tsaress.
Tsarina.
And keep that going. And then, like, 3 weeks later, shit went down.
Yes.
And that's when the entire Tsar family was executed by...
Well, they weren't executed immediately.
Yeah.
They were taken to, I think, a hunting lodge and kept there.
The rebellion, the upheaval, the revolution, all that. That's when the Russian Revolution happened. Mm-hmm. So Rasputin had some sway.
So it's even argued... Well, it was a bunch of people who were upset with the monarchy as well.
Yeah.
So one could even argue that Rasputin's death was the cause of the Russian Revolution, because people may think that it was a curse.
Yeah. Like,
he cursed the land, and once he was dead, everything went apart.
And Empress of Russia. Empress Alexandria, when the Tsar was away at war for World War I, while she was in control, leaned on Rasputin and was relying on mysticism and occultism and all this mystical things for solace, waiting for her husband, and then trying to also rule an entire empire.
Which I could easily see that being distressful, because this is back in 1916. Yeah. They don't have instant messages. Mm-mm. If Nicholas had died in battle, she wouldn't hear about it until at least maybe a month, maybe at least a few weeks at most.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't hear anything for weeks. Then she comes back saying, "Oh yeah," and then messenger comes by and says, "Yes, he has been shot dead."
Yeah. So, and I mean, after World War One, everything else that happened with the revolution, the League of Nations happening much after the Second World War, and basically empires crumbling after the World War One end. The Byzantine, the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
The Russian Tsar Empire. All these things came crumbling down, and I believe, I would go as far to say that the mysticism and the occultism of the past and the old era fell way to the new era of revolution and democracy and all these other systems of government that felt at the time superior.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Rasputin was just the catalyst that was needed.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, Russia has sort of been behind on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Historically, like this is not a jab at Russia. This is just speaking historically because for the longest time, Russia was still in the Dark Ages until Peter the Great, one of the czars of Russia, he traveled throughout all of Europe, and he even told his men, "All right, don't look conspicuous." Yet he was like 6'2", 6'3". He was a tall, well-structured Russian who had all of his bodyguards with him, and at one point he even went to like an autopsy, like they would do live autopsies for medical students.
Yeah.
And if one of his men fainted or grew sick, he would go, "Nope, you're getting your head in there." Like, he would outright, if they were going to go with him, they had to be tough. And then he would take a lot of his findings from his trips throughout Europe and bring them back to Russia to bring Russia out of the Dark Ages into a more modern era.
Yeah.
And then Russia still had an empire and everything. Yes, England still has a queen, but she's more of a figurehead for the church. She doesn't really have the power anymore.
For church and for historical purposes.
Yeah, it's just pageantry.
Yeah.
But Russia, they had an actual, monarch in power. Mm-hmm. The monarchies don't really last. And
no.
This one for sure didn't. Once the Russian Revolution happened, that was it. Yeah. But one thing can be said with Rasputin, though. He had such a legacy, going from a trouble-causing peasant child who was illiterate to one of the most influential, possibly power-hungry, possibly one of the most evil men. Again, this is allegedly because, for all we know, he may have just been a sex addict.
Yeah, and I mean, he may have thought that he was doing good.
Exactly, but we'll never know because he was shot dead, and he had a lot of people who hated him, who mudslinged him, who with their own power and influence, because there was a lot of nobles that hated him, they were able to, and obviously with the Tsar out of power, they were able to spread all these lies about Rasputin for years, and that eventually just muddied his image. Like, one of the first times I remember ever hearing about Rasputin and thinking, this guy is an evil, evil person, was the 1990s, I forgot what year, animated movie Anastasia.
98?
98, 97.
Yeah.
It was a Don Bluth cartoon, so it was all traditional.
It was a non-Disney.
Yes, which is why it was able to get as dark as it did with Rasputin, who was played by Christopher Lloyd of all people. So he had a fantastic time.
Yeah.
And this Rasputin, they have him dressed in the stereotypical monk robes, the big brown hooded robe, not like the cassock, which is what most priests actually do wear, is the cassock. And he has this reliquary that he legitimately sacrifices his soul for this reliquary that controls dark forces. He made a deal with the devil, essentially. And with his power, he was he tries to grab Anastasia as she's running away with her grandmother, the Dowager Empress, but he winds up falling through a hole in the ice and drowning. Instead of getting shot, they made him more nefarious.
Yeah. They definitely villainized him a lot more for purpose of being a movie.
But it's like, but that right there is why, is the power, the influence from the rich people from the nobles, saying that he was a monster. It became part of a pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
And heck, you and I both have watched Hellboy.
Yep.
The main bad guy is Rasputin.
Yep.
Who claims to have made a deal with an eldritch being that was taking over his body, trying to bring the Ogdru Jahad into our world.
And then the Kingsman prequel.
Yes.
That I know you haven't watched. That was probably the most entertaining depiction of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't violently evil. He was part of like this one of those Illuminati-esque sort of groups.
Yeah.
Where he was an underling. He wasn't even the top rung.
That's saying something.
But the way they depicted him, I feel, is probably the funniest way. Because he was fighting the Kingsman guys, the father and son spy duo, and their assistant. And he was doing the stereotypical, the crouching...
The Russian
dance. Sword fighting against these three guys and wiping the floor with them.
That's awesome.
And they touched on his sexuality. They were actually using the son as bait to lure him away so they could poison him with tea, cakes, and wine. Mm-hmm. And a nod to the historical.
Yeah.
They shot him, I think, 3-4 times. And then they tried to drown him in the river, and Rasputin turns out on the father and starts drowning him.
Uh-huh.
So all those things are touched on with the character. And I think the the heroine of it, the female agent, ends up shooting him in the head.
Nice.
And just straight up, like, he's got the three guys on the floor just wiped. And he's just standing there like, this is all you have? Boom. Right in the forehead.
Ah.
I was like, and he just like, and falls over.
Nice.
And that's it. Like, that's the end of him. They don't say anything more about him. But I think he was probably the most entertaining variant of Rasputin.
Yeah. He's appeared in a bunch of, Rasputin has had such a massive impact on pop culture. Because, I mean, earlier in this episode, I was singing the song by Boney M called Rasputin, which recounts a brief explanation of who he was. And I didn't even know that song existed until like a bunch of TikTok videos were using it as background noise. And I was like, well,
there's even a metal band that does a cover of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a pretty catchy song, not gonna lie.
Oh yeah, it is. It is definitely one of those that I'm just like, okay, I can get it out of my head.
I mean,
and then there's other songs about it. There's I think actually like a band called Ra-ra-Rasputin. Where there's a song. There are other depictions I've seen him in. He appeared at the end of an episode of Billy and Mandy, where
I haven't heard that show.
Where it was the episode where Billy had the spirit of Lord Byron trying to tell him how to be a gentleman or whatever. And then at the end of it, Mandy, how they got the spirit in the first place was they sucked on Grimm's head on the back of his skull.
Yeah, I remember
and then she has 3 spirits pop out. Genghis Khan, Conqueror, Rasputin, who in this one he's got like a dagger through the head and a gunshot and a dagger through the stomach. Mm-hmm. And then Abe Lincoln. And she's like, okay, Genghis Khan and Rasputin, you talk. Abe Lincoln, get the chips. Because it's Mandy. She's
a dark little evil child.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Rasputin... No, he didn't. I was thinking Rasputin appeared in the Night at the Museum movies. He didn't. That was Ivan the Terrible.
Yeah. That would be a good subject. Ivan the Terrible.
Oh, he's got plenty.
Or Vlad the Impaler.
Oh, that would be a good one.
But, so my question for the end of this episode, how far in are we?
Oh, we're about 52 minutes. This will be a short episode.
Yeah, this will be a shorter one.
I think our historical episodes definitely are more historical based, focused on.
Yeah.
Because
There's sources.
There's sources. There's not as
And
much
it's not
speculation.
open-ended.
Yeah, it's not as much speculation, and there's not like a bunch of stories that come up.
If you could go back and interview Rasputin, what would be one question you'd want to ask him?
I've never thought of asking. I never thought of that question. Never thought of doing that. What do you do?
Yeah, but here, what would you do? I honestly, I was hoping you might have an answer. I would probably, besides asking how he got that magnificent beard,
He grew it.
All right, smart ass.
That's what I did with mine.
I would probably just ask his thoughts on the Khaleesi group he was a part of.
I would actually do the same. I would be curious. I would say, were you a part of the Khaleesi group? Like, I would want to know. I really would want to know, like, even if it's personal life, I would love to know what his life was like beforehand to debunk a lot of the myth behind the man.
I would want to know, like, was he power, like, did he believe he was like a demigod? Was he just power hungry? Well, what was his ambition? What was his goal for it?
That would be another good one too. So I would want, because I want to dispel a lot of rumors, because for again, all we know, he could have been doing stuff out of the actual benefit for Russia.
Yeah, and just sucked at it.
Yes, and then a bunch of nobles came by, and a bunch of nobles got pissed off and said, "No, he's the devil. He's a boogeyman."
If you sleep with enough of their wives, yeah.
Anybody will get upset about that, unless they're swingers.
And the crazy. Caught me off guard there.
Yes.
Alrighty. The craziest thing about this is all that stuff. He assisted, I think, in building an empire up to its pinnacle, and then brought it crumbling down.
Yeah, from the pinnacle to the pit.
He was 47 when he died.
Yep.
Like, he didn't even live half a century, and he did that.
And it started 37 when he was 37 with the monk.
It was his last 10, 15 years of life that he got power.
He had the best 10 years of his life.
Yeah. That's crazy that he was able to accomplish that in that span of time.
Oh, yeah. So if you're ever got big ambitions, it's never too late.
Think Rasputin. Well, don't think like Rasputin.
There's only two ways to think like Rasputin. One with your brain, one with your other head.
No, with your person.
Exactly.
So, I think we'll end this episode on a teaser, because I know what you're planning on doing, you dick. You person. This
is episode 3, and so we have 2 more episodes until a very special episode that I am way too excited about.
So I'm going to volunteer this information. I say for episode 4, we do one that I love talking about. It's probably one of my top 2 favorite cryptids.
Okay.
I say we talk about the Jersey Devil.
Ooh.
Or the famous Loch Ness.
Those would be very good ones. I would have to go with Jersey Devil, because that one, I know I can find some stuff about the people.
Yeah.
I can find a lot about the people. Just give me time on that one.
I say we do one of those, or we find some other cryptid between then and there, and then episode 5.
So, I will keep you up. I will keep you all, what's the word?
In suspense? In
suspense. I'll keep you all in suspense about episode 5 is until we get done with episode 4.
So, I'll give one hint.
Mm-hmm.
I love hearing about serial killer, like stats wise. Like, I'm weird like that. Like, I like their free throw percentage. But past the numbers is where I start getting squeamish, and where I start, like, I don't lose interest, but I start shying away.
All right. I will say this. So, what we're going to do is every 5 episodes, so 5, 10, 15, 20, go on, I mean me, I will be doing an episode on a serial killer. And it will be a whole event, all just to watch Tony freak out, because he knows a little bit about them, but not nearly as much as I do.
This is all revenge for the Frogman thing, isn't it?
No, I had this planned out. Like, the second I had this plan because I wanted to talk about serial killers because there's some mysticism behind them, but there's also just the fact that there's a lot of what the fuck.
Yeah. Like, I know Gacy was a clown, and I know Bundy had a Beetle, like a Volkswagen Beetle.
Yep.
I've watched the documentaries and the movies, and none of it retains.
I will say this: I will not be covering John Wayne Gacy or Ted Bundy, just because they both have their big specials and documentaries that have been picked clean to the bone. So those ones will stay out, but a lot of others, they're free reign.
Not looking forward to that at all.
But when we get there, we'll get there.
We'll get there. If I don't go missing between episode 5 and 6, it's Tim's fault. Goodbye.